Folks, it is officially franchise tag season, kind of, period, maybe is a different type of word for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and really every team around the league where a lot of players are rumored or at least talked about whether or not getting that franchise tag is the correct decision or not. One player that has been brought up specifically for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is cornerback Jamel Dean. And joining me in this video today to talk about that potential move that the Buccaneers may or may not make is Josh Queipo of the Pewter Report. He does articles, he is on their podcast, he does everything in between covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Josh, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking, and I appreciate you having me on.
I thank you so much for being on. And Josh, whenever I look at this move, first thing you got to consider is the financials, right? I know you are the financial guy over there at pewterreport.com, and I sound like a broken record whenever I say this, and I know you've been saying the same thing as well. Currently, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are $55 million over the cap. They have got to do something, and they will. They obviously have to get cap compliant before the start of the new league year. So, whenever you think about the idea of giving Jamel Dean a long-term extension or franchising Jamel Dean, if you can't come to terms on a long-term deal, gives you another year to hold off a long-term deal until you get some more cap space next year. Is this even feasible right now for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be able to do? Can they make enough moves and save up enough money to not just get cap compliant by the start of the new league year, but even have the possibility of franchise tagging a guy like Jamel Dean?
So the short answer would be yes, it's feasible. The long answer, as with most things that relate to the Bucks and the cap, it's much more nuanced and it's most likely not practical. As you mentioned, the Bucks currently stand to be 55, $56 million over the cap as things stand currently, and that is absolutely not allowed. You did a great job of kind of introing their situation and saying that the Bucks have to be cap compliant by 4 p.m. on March, I want to say 15th, when the new league year starts. So that means already they have to do a bunch of moves. Now, they have different levers that they can pull that will allow them to become cap compliant. I think the ones that are almost a guaranteed to happen when you talk about restructures, Chris Godwin's going to be restructured, Vita Vea is going to be restructured, Carlton Davis most likely will, Ryan Jensen. There's a litany of other guys on veteran deals, and basically a restructure just means that the Bucks are going to pay out cash right now to reduce their cap hit this year and push those cap hits into future years and basically force themselves to have to account for it on future years. The other 3 to 5 moves that are pretty likely, I would say Ryan Suckup, the Bucks kicker, left tackle Donovan Smith, and running back, tight end Cam Brate and running back Leonard Fournette. They're all most likely going to be cut, which is going to save the Bucks about $8 to $9 million there. And then you have 2 other players who are kind of on the bubble. I think they're probably going to be cut, which would be Russell Gage and Donovan Smith. If all of those things are done and the Bucks decide to extend Mike Evans for a couple years, I have his market rate at about $20 million a year, and possibly even give Devin White his extension early and give him probably about a 5-year, $100 million deal that he's looking for. That could help reduce their cap hits for 23. And if they do all of those things, and it's not guaranteed that they do them all, they would have about $35 million in space, in cap space. Now, keep in mind, they can't use all $35 million immediately. They're going to need a little over $9 million for their draft picks. And they're going to probably need about $3 to $5 million in working room in season. Okay. So you take that money off and you're looking at somewhere around $20 million that they have to work with. Now, the franchise tag for cornerback for 2023, it's $17 million. So you're using almost all that money on Jamel Dean, and they still have a lot of players that they're losing this year. It's something a little over 20 players, I think right around 23. And yes, the draft picks are going to account for some of that, but they still have holes that they're going to have to fill in free agency. So could they do it? Yes. Is there a scenario where they pull the trigger on the tag? One small one, which would be they're holding it while they finish up a long-term deal with him, which would reduce his cap hit. You saw this happen last year with Chris Godwin, where they tagged him for the second year in a row. And it was just a placeholder for them to finish up the deal that they actually wanted to do on a long-term basis. And that's what I honestly think would be the only scenario where they exercise the franchise tag on Dean. They're finishing up the contract details, and they just don't want him to hit free agency where somebody else can come in with a bigger deal. But will Dean play on a franchise tag in 2023? I'm 95% sure that's not going to happen.
Well, and that's another thing I want to bring up too, is I think that a lot of people feel like it's a foregone conclusion that Jamel Dean's going to go to another team in free agency. And I want to know your thoughts on that, because obviously you could keep him in the franchise tag. And I think that is a little bit of a loophole here in the video of saying that's a placeholder until they get a long-term deal done. Could you see the Buccaneers getting a long-term deal done with Jamel Dean, having a lower cap hit this offseason, and then kind of kicking it down the road a little bit to where it spreads out or gains more as the years go on, because they are going to have more cap space in later years? Could you see a scenario like that happening?
I don't think it's likely, for a few reasons. From Dean's point of view, he's going to try and max out his value. And I just don't see the Bucs valuing a number 2 corner that much when they've already made that payday to Carlton Davis. If you're looking at Davis, I think his AAV was somewhere around $14-15 million a year. You're looking at Jamel Dean probably getting around 17. You're locking up 32 to somewhere between 30 and $35 million a year in annual average value to your cornerback position. That's huge. The only team that I can think of off the top of my head that's done something like that recently was the Miami Dolphins. So most teams don't put that much cap into that position, not to say that it's not valuable. The other thing that's kind of working against Dean coming back to Tampa Bay is this cornerback class coming out of college this year is deep. I was just going back and forth on Twitter with some guys. Like, I'm like 18 guys deep in my evals of corner, and there are so many 1st to 3rd round grades. It's a really great class to grab some guys. I do think Todd Bowles is very high on Zion McCollum as well, going into his 2nd year. Athletic testing last year was off the charts. Had a rough rookie season. He's going to have to develop if he wants to see the field more. But I think the Bucs really are counting on that to happen and him to make a year 2 jump. And then the last thing, much more minor point, but following the Bucs playoff loss to the Cowboys, where Dean was effectively benched on defense for Sean Murphy bunting, he went to social media and he let his displeasure with that decision be known. So there may be a little bit of bad blood there in that negotiation that I just think is going to it's one more thing to prevent that from happening. I just don't see him back.
Well, even to a point like that, you named off a laundry list of things that would need to happen to make, one, a franchise tag make sense, but also you would imagine, 70% of those moves would probably have to happen. Maybe like 50% of those moves would probably have to happen if you wanted to get even a long-term deal done with Jamel Dean. Like you said, Dean, he's going to get paid. He's going to. And the Buccaneers just point blank aren't in the most feasible situation to pay a guy like Carlton Davis, pay a lot of their other players as well at high dollar values, and then also pay a guy like Dean. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, right now as it stands, the Bucs still have a question mark at the quarterback position. I mean, you could have Kyle Trask, but there's been talks that they could go out there, get a veteran quarterback, get something along those lines. You can't do that if you have a ton of money tied up into one position group, especially between 2 players, Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean. So I think that when you do look at a franchise tag or even a long-term deal, I agree with your points there, where it just doesn't make a lot of sense given all the other needs that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have right now. I think that, as tough as it may be for some people to accept or look at, you are looking at a very, very realistic possibility that the Bucs aren't going to be able to keep a guy like Jamel Dean around. Unfortunately, guys really pay themselves out and go and get their paydays to other teams around the league. We just saw a guy like Jordan Whitehead do it last year, and you may see a similar thing here with Jamel Dean. Another thing to consider as well is you brought it up, that Dallas Cowboys game. They started Sean Murphy bunting over Jamel Dean. I personally think that Jamel Dean should have been the starting cornerback, but I'm not the head coach. Josh, you're not the head coach either. And what did Todd Bowles say after that game? He said, well, they were so close in terms of play and whatnot that we decided to go with Sean Murphy-Bunting. You can probably keep Sean Murphy-Bunting at a cheaper deal than what it would cost for Jamel Dean. So
No question there.
is that potentially the Buccaneers' plan here, where they may say, okay, we're not going to be able to keep Jamel Dean. That sucks, $17 million. Yeah, we can't pay that, unfortunately. We can't even tag that. But if we keep a guy like Sean Murphy-Bunting and we go into next season with a potential trio, at least just got our own guys of Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting, and Zion McCollum, and we haven't even brought anybody else in yet, that may be their plan moving forward, Josh. Is that kind of a similar thought pattern that you're on right now?
Yeah, I definitely think the Bucks will explore the idea of bringing Sean Murphy-Bunting back as depth, potentially somebody who can compete for that starting role. He is going to come much cheaper than Dean will. I've comped him kind of to, if you remember Kevin, most Bucks fans remember Kevin King from the Packers because he got torched by Scotty Miller in the 2020 playoffs. King, after his rookie contract, he signed a 1-year deal for about $5 million with the Packers in 2021. And I think that's probably where Sean Murphy-Bunting's value is going to be, somewhere in that $3.5 to $5 million range on a 1-year prove-it deal. And I think that's something palatable that the Bucks will want to look at, to give them, again, somebody who knows the system, somebody who has had in short, very brief bursts, high level play, including this past season where he had a 3 or 4 game stretch towards the end of the year where he was playing very well, and somebody who isn't going to be super expensive. And that'll help them continue to bring McCollum along, potentially draft somebody in the early to mid rounds, as they start to turn over this cornerback room.
Well, folks, it is going to be a very, very interesting situation regarding, as Josh just said, the cornerback room, what the Buccaneers are going to do regarding their number 2 corner, their number 3 corner, and really a lot of other position groups as well, Josh. It's going to be a fun offseason. Look, Josh, I want to thank you so much for being on this video, man. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Made your debut on the channel, man. Pretty cool, right?
I'm very excited to be on. This has been one of the things that I get to check off my my to-do list in terms of being a part of kind of the greater Bucks world.
Well, again, hey, Josh, thank you so much for being on. To everybody who is watching this video, let us know your thoughts and opinions about the financials that we talked about regarding Jamel Dean and possibly receiving the franchise tag or getting a long-term deal. Let us know your thoughts and opinions about that. We would love to hear them. Go check out Josh's work over at pewterreport.com. He does phenomenal work with articles, crunching the numbers, and doing everything in between with draft analysis as well. And also go give him a follow on Twitter. I will have that down in the pinned comment down in the comment section below. But folks, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope y'all enjoyed. And as always, folks, we will see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucks.